I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Debbie, here with four-time Emmy-winning production designer Deborah Riley. Deborah, first up, after all the work that went into Three Body Problem, how do you feel that the show has been so enthusiastically embraced by critics and audiences worldwide?
First of all, thanks for having me, Rob. And second of all, a great sense of relief, I have to say. As you might be able to imagine, like reading Three Body Problem as a novel and then reading the script, it's very intimidating. And I'm sure that my colleagues have said the same thing. Oftentimes, when we were actually making the show, we didn't always understand what we were making. It was very difficult to kind of get a handle on.
Yeah.
So to see it all and to realize that people have embraced it is an enormous relief and something that's really satisfying.
Yeah, I can imagine it. And I sometimes envisage, especially everyone in the creative team, getting the novel and the script and just be like, nah, I don't know how the hell we're going to make this work, but you did make it work. So let's talk about why and how. First up, the story features this really mind-bending narrative device where the characters enter this expansive VR game. So that's already like, okay, there's going to be a lot for you to do here to construct and design all the different locations and sets, like a desert landscape,
Mm.
and a cathedral, and a temple, and a volcanic, all those things. So tell me what you thought when you realized, okay, the VR game is going to be next level for me. Where do you begin?
Well, as you know, I first met the guys in a medieval landscape. So this VR world was something entirely different. So it really was trying to figure out what the guys, what David, Dan, and Alex had in their collective brain about what this VR sequence would look like and these sequences that traveled with the characters. So it really began with a lot of concept art, just trying to take stabs in the dark. Is it like this? Is it like this? Is it, like, is it, do we push it in terms of color? Do we treat it really realistically? Is it somewhere in between? Jonathan Freeman, the cinematographer, he was with us for that ride as well. And Derek Sang, who directed the first two episodes, he was the first director to introduce it. So there were a lot of speaking parts as we came to define it. And yeah, I actually went back to basics, which is where I started with David and Dan on Game of Thrones, which was making it actually a very grounded environment, which is really the point of the VR anyway, is that, you know, the players in the game experience it like they experience real life. They can feel it, they can touch it. It's something where all of the weather patterns, it's something that they can viscerally feel. So it seemed like as good a place as any. And so, you know, what does a Chinese pyramid look like? Well, we don't really know, but let's go for something based on whatever is, you know, available. But we know more what a cathedral would look like, what a medieval cathedral would look like. So, you know, we were in Wells for that and shot in Wells Cathedral. Yeah, you know, there were things that we could touch upon. Our Mongolian piece for Kubla Khan, his pleasure dome, that big balcony, that was a beautiful big build that we did, but again, based on Mongolian architecture. So I try wherever I can to ground it as much as possible. But as you say, the VR was a whole different level of just what does that mean in this new world.
Yeah, given your experience with particularly Dave and Dan on Game of Thrones, does that give you a bit more license to take chances and risks and to kind of swing for the fences using that idiom and not worrying about what the showrunners are going to, whether they're going to just slam you down and say no? Or does that give you a bit of creative
Yeah.
license to do that?
Yeah, ultimately I'm slapped down anyway. But
Oh well, that's fine.
the great thing is, and something that I've really learned from working with the guys, is just the value of loyalty. Having come through all of those years with them and realizing the way they work and just what it means, the value of working with the same team over and over again, the shortcuts that you have, understanding how each other work, that's absolutely invaluable. So when it came to Three Body Problem, it paid off in spades because my communication with the guys in many ways was shortcut. You know, I knew that are into these epic kind of landscapes, that's really their wheelhouse. But how they would behave in a science fiction universe, I wasn't entirely sure of.
Yeah.
But as it turned out, a lot of the same ground rules applied.
I was thinking that, on a big sci-fi show like this, you obviously break down the scripts, you understand the characters, and then you work out what you're going to do. Was there anything in particular when you thought about what you had ahead of you that was something that you were worried about, or did that kept you up at night, or did that not really
Yeah.
happen on this project?
Yeah, well, it did, surprisingly enough. For me, it was all of the work in China,
Yeah.
where we start in the Cultural Revolution, and the importance of getting that absolutely right and truthful. And then working in that control room, on the Red Coast base, where Yuanji is when she, presses that button. Working on all of that was of prime importance to me. And knowing that we had Derek with us was very comforting to me, but I also made sure that I had a Chinese art director with me as well. His name was Chapman Khan, and he was an enormous support. We also had Chinese graphic designers. We made sure that we were bolstered by people who really knew what they were looking at and could, sniff me out the minute that anything seemed remotely phony. So that was a relief, but something that in the initial stages I was terrified of.
So, given that you are going for a realism and authenticity, and I know that you've said that you wanted to do that when you were working on Game of Thrones as well, what happens when there's something that is really like we've never really seen it before? For example, like the VR headset. Like, where does that design come from?
Yeah, I know. And the VR headset was something that we landed on relatively quickly, actually. I started looking at historical designs of headsets, where NASA had started, and kind of clunking through things with the guys, just trying to get their initial response. And that's really all it is at the start is, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? What are your thoughts? And it became immediately clear that really what they were after was something that A, we'd never seen before, and B, we would never understand. There were to be no sources where it would be charged. You couldn't actually understand how it would work. You could analyze this thing and have absolutely no clue how those images were being projected, inside that headset. So that's the whole key to the whole thing. And for book readers, it's obvious that the headset had to be mirrored. And you can imagine how popular I was with visual effects when that came along. Because obviously that headset's looking at the crew, the lights, everything else out there. So every time you see a headset on screen, that's a massive amount of work for those guys. So it was really just paring back that headset to the simplest we could possibly get it. And I really loved the box that the gamers received as well, with their name embossed on the top. The way it was
Yeah.
presented was a really cool prop. What a hero prop. It was fantastic.
It's such a cool prop. I've been trying to figure out the nicest way possible to ask my mates at Netflix to get me one. So
It's on
far, I
sale
have.
in the Netflix shop.
Is it? I did it. Okay, you all heard that here first, everybody. Go on. I'm gonna go and buy one. I just think it's amazing, just to have it. It's a completely useless prop, but I'll want it.
I know
Um,
completely. It doesn't actually work.
it doesn't
Actually, it was
actually work.
fantastic. On the premiere that we had, a screening we had in LA, they had headsets for everybody, and it was
Wow.
fantastic. You can't imagine the kick that I got out of seeing people walking around wearing one.
No, I did that. I did that. Um, can we just share with our viewers today that the two pivotal design department heads on this show are Aussies. You on the production design side, and Oscar-nominated costume designer Michael Wilkinson. Can we just let everybody know how incredibly talented Aussies are and innovative they are in creation and design? Go for it. Tell me everything, because I agree.
Well, I've known the gorgeous Michael Wilkinson for about 30 years. So we
Really?
were at the National Institute of Dramatic Art together, NIDA, as it's called
Yeah.
here. We both studied the design course. Michael was a few years ahead of me, but he was very well known and very well respected right from the start. So a few years ago, we crossed paths again when where were we when we went into the Star Wars universe or something briefly together?
Oh,
And
yes.
yeah, and then yeah, I've been sort of best buddies with him ever since, and it's been such a wonderful thing to see him again. But there are so many Australians. Australians are known for, you know, they work in front of the camera, but
Yep.
there's also so many of us behind the camera, and we're really well trained here in Australia. We're known as being really hard workers, and yeah, we completely punch above our weight, and it's just brilliant.
Always punching above our weight. I needed to throw that in there. But speaking of another thing that blew my mind in this show was episode 5, Judgment Day, directed by Minky Spiro, who just happens to live like 15 minutes from you and me in Sydney. Um, that episode was so breathtaking because obviously of the ship Judgment Day and the way that it's sliced like deli ham by
Yeah.
nanofibers. Um, I don't really have a question. I just want you to tell me what on earth, how did that eventuate? Because it would not have been easy.
No, it wasn't easy, and it occupied a lot of our brain space for a very long time. Um, but Minky helmed that ship, and all credit to her, because it really was a matter of just breaking it down into pieces where we understood the process of what it would take to slice that ship. And it all began really for me in episode 2 when we establish Augie's nanotechnology, when we see the diamond cutting machine and the diamond razors through those fibers, and then it falls to pieces. So once we've developed the idea that yes, these nanofibers are capable of cutting this diamond, then we have to extrapolate and figure out how that works for a tanker. So yeah, we had to just break it down into the pieces. Okay, we see them at the side of the canal there. They're piecing it together. Wade has all of those engineers with him, and right, they're setting up the sequence. Got it. We see them in the trailer where they're going to watch the whole sequence take place. So, you know, we have those monitors, we have them in that high tech situation. And then we built the deck of that ship out in Shepparton Studios, and so you know every stage of it was completely understood as to what would slice first. And it was Minky's idea, I think, to come up with the idea that that guy was out hosing the deck, and first of all he would, you know, be very confused when the water source was cut off, and be, you know, and next thing you see him sliced. So it was just going through piece by piece. This slices first, then this, then this. The kid, you see the kid behind that cyclone fencing, but you know, he's watching the, you know, the helicopter and piece as we went through. We built a couple of hallways, corridors on stage. There was the what we called the executive corridor, where Mike Evans' office was, and also Felix's high-tech cabin. We built what we referred to as the public corridor, which had that little sort of school type setup and the cafeteria. And then we also had to build the area where Mike Evans meets his demise when he's there clutching that hard drive. So it was a series of builds, you know, piecing it together. And then we did a massive build of the debris, the aftermath of that sequence as well. So we took it through all of its stages, piece by piece by piece. And Minky was always very clear exactly what she needed out of each of those setups. So that was the only thing that I think kept us sane throughout the whole process.
It just sounds like so much forward planning because I didn't quite realize until I spoke to Minky that a lot of this was done in camera.
Yeah.
Like you could have taken lots of shortcuts and it would not have looked anywhere near as good as it does. But such a huge risk as well, Deb, because you know, it's a lot of this rests on the art department. And so does that kind of thing occur to you when you're on a big job like this?
Yeah, because you just don't want it to look wonky. You know,
No.
there's because if we don't buy it, we don't buy anything. You know, if you didn't buy the diamond cutter in episode 2, you wouldn't buy Judgment Day in episode 5. And if you don't buy the horror of it, then, you know, the whole sequence is lost. And yeah, just understanding what it would be like to be on that ship with it moving through these things that you can't see. People are running in one direction, you know, there's confusion, what's going on? You see backpacks fall, you see lights go, you see pipes, you know, it was a big special effects sequence as well. So
It,
yeah, it was massive.
It reminds me that, of course, the relationship between production design and visual effects teams is so critical because they're helping out with extending sets. They're also amplifying certain elements. You, of course, are creating the baseline, design, aesthetic. What happens on a show, not Three Body Problem, when those two departments don't quite gel? Does that when things start to fall apart? No pun intended.
I assume so, yeah. I mean, we have the advantage that we've all worked together for so long. So the communication is always the key. And so when you get on set, we've already spent months and months planning it. So we all know exactly what's going to be there and where I finish, and then special effects will start, and then visual effects will take over from there. So nothing is ever a surprise. And both for the director, the cinematographer, our showrunners, everybody involved should all understand exactly what they're getting on the day. And you can't imagine, Rob, how many times we stepped through that sequence. I mean, we must have
Really?
bored the socks off everybody, you know, just going, okay, right, can we do this again? We're doing this, then we're doing that, then we're doing that. And yeah, it was just something that we had to be very, very rigorous with. Otherwise, you know, Minky wouldn't, because you've got to remember as well, I mean, we're on a television deadline.
Yeah.
You know, we're shooting quickly. So Minky has to make her days. So we have to be really certain that we've got everything she's expecting. And, you know, camera needs everything. They have everything ready to go. Right. This is the first setup. Let's go. So
Yeah.
that's my job really, is just to facilitate from an art department point of view, everything I possibly can, you know, with the set decoration team, of course, you know, they're heroes as well as the props department.
Oh, for
And
sure.
and when we all turn up on the day, you know, we're just I've got to be crossing our fingers and making sure it all works the way we hoped.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a Francis Ford Coppola epic that you can shoot for 2 years. This is quick TV, big budget, but we've got to get this done within a deadline. I just don't know how you do it. I really don't. It's like looks like a miracle to me. But final question, and you kind of touched on this already, but this production designer is really fantastic one that I really admire. Once told me that she's often terrified about constructing the physical space on a show and then it looking like too proppy or too fake
Yeah.
and artifice. How do you work with the set decorators particularly to make the space feel authentic and lived in? I'm thinking an example would be the scenes in China are a great example of that. But yeah,
Yeah.
is that something is obviously always front of mind?
Yeah, and it's something that haunts all production designers, I think. You know, I'm not alone. But it's something that just requires a lot of hard work. It's layers and layers and layers. And oftentimes it comes down to a set painter, you know, who will just touch all of those props and touch all of the walls and just make sure they feel a little bit lived in. You know, a bit of a layer of dust over everything helps. Yeah, and you've just got to look at everything and just kind of squint slightly and just say to yourself, do I believe that? You know, do I believe that? And then, you know, David and Dan and Alex, you know, the minute that they see anything where they sniff some sort of artificiality, you know, I'd never survive. So
Yeah,
I've learned how to become, you know, my own critic over the years, and you know, understand what the camera can bite onto and believe, and what it, you know, what it just sniffs out as being, you know, a prop. You never want anything to feel like a prop or a bit of dressing. It's got to
no,
feel like
real.
someone's put it there for a reason. Yeah.
That's right. Otherwise, we're out. We're out of the story, and that's the key. That's the king, is making sure that you're supporting the story. And Deb, I think, mate, you're on your A game on this one. You really did such a wonderful job. Thank you for your time
That's
and your insight today.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks so much for, you know, caring about production design. It really means a lot to all of us in the art department. So thank you.